as an FBI special agent was my dream job. My whistleblowing was apolitical and in the spirit of upholding my oath. Nonetheless, the FBI cynically elected to close ranks and attack the messenger.
The FBI will crush you. This government will crush you and your family if you try to expose the truth about things that they are doing that are wrong. We are all examples of that.
Joining us now are Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle. Thanks for joining us, fellas.
FBI whistleblower Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle both join us now. Gentlemen, so glad to have you on the program. Thank you for your testimony.
We need more folks like you, and I'm sure more people are going to be from your background are going to be giving you guys more intel as you're sharing that with the rest of us. We can kind of see that this is becoming normal for them to be held accountable, because I think especially an institution that we pay their salaries, they need to be held accountable.
I think a lot of people do share our beliefs and convictions. I think they just aren't at the point that Steve and I and others have gotten to. They're too afraid.
Thank you so much for being a guest here on PBD Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
How big is that bloody flag that Steve's got? It's the stone wall of his house. Lots of love, guys. Thanks very much for joining us.
Steve Friend, Garrett O'Boyle, thank you for being with us this morning. More importantly, thank you for speaking out. We appreciate it.
You're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and pursue the truth with FBI whistleblowers and founding suspendables Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast on a Tuesday, 8:30 Eastern Time, and we're excited to start a brand new week with you here on Rumble. Rumble.com/AmRadPod is where you find us. Be sure to smash the thumbs up and follow the channel. We had some problems with the chat on Saturday. I don't know what it was. We did the same thing we always do, but I don't know. Maybe the FBI had some people that came in on a Saturday to mess with us. We're not sure. Back up and running. Glad to have you with us. It's live and lively as always in there. If you are listening to the audio format of the podcast on Spotify and iHeart and iTunes, do subscribe so you can get the automatic updates when we drop new episodes of the show Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday. Tuesday, Thursday, always 8:30 Eastern Time, Saturday at noon time. So it's a brand new week. We're back at it on a Tuesday. Going to be tight today. 59-minute rule is in effect, and that's okay because we have plenty to fill that time out. Good, because today we're going to be talking about hills to die on. You know, sort of the motto of the suspendables is Isaiah 6:8, and whom shall I send? Here I am, send me. Recognizing when you're on the hill and not being afraid of that moment. It's people who are afraid to take that fight because they think if I don't fight, I can't lose. That's not true. And I think unfortunately, too many people in a position of authority within the United States federal government, even state levels, local levels, people who you're hoping want to ascend into some position of leadership, servant leadership, but leadership nonetheless, they're going to recognize that moment and take that stand, and they're not doing it. So, folks, we're going to have to put on the Thanos gauntlet and do it ourselves. So we're going to highlight some of the stories out there of people that recognize the moment, saw the hill, said, we're taking fire here, and I'm going to die on this hill if necessary. It is what I am here to do. And nobody more emblematic of that fight than my co-host today, Garrett O'Boyle at GOB Actual. Hope you had a good weekend, and great to be back on a Tuesday morning. How you doing?
Doing well. We had a good weekend here. Got a little bit of summer flavor back in these northern parts, which is always appreciated. Even though I'm sure it's like decently summer by you still, but here we're grateful for an extra warm day here and there, but it's looking like we're even going to have a warm week. So we're grateful for that up here. As you know, not the biggest fan of Wisconsin, but it's where the Lord has established our path, at least for now.
Well, part of your weekend had to be the breaking expose, I guess, profile story from The Blaze from our mutual friend, Steve Hanneman, and I believe, or Joe Hanneman and Steve Baker assisted on that story. They came out there to Nineveh, right, and interviewed you about your trials and tribulations, and seeing that actually put in my head, I said, look, we need to throw some attention to this story because it's a great story about your entire experience. And in the chat, a lot of times we'll say, hey, we want an update, Garrett. We want an update. And we have been able to grow the audience to a certain level now that I think, like, let's do a little refresher on Garrett O'Boyle, and then we'll get to some other examples. But like, look, we are not beyond just promoting shameless self-promotion. So folks, go to theblaze.com. It's still prominently displayed there, and you will see the FBI will crush you. And if you watch our intro, that's Garrett's gangster moment. Suspended special agent Garrett O'Boyle risks it all to warn Americans about politicized agency. And it's a pretty long piece, but it's not like reading through a Charles Dickens novel. It's pretty easy read. And it goes into things that I think get a bit lost in the shuffle. And you even have told me, like, I forgot all the stuff I did. So it's probably good. So just the premise of the piece, Garrett, what's your comments?
Yeah, well, one, I mean, I'm really grateful to Joe especially and to Steve for breathing some air back into this, because as you know, and I think as a lot of diehard Amratters know, like that's my life. It's your life. Like it's not going anywhere. It's been 2 years, just about. Well, let's see. It's the 17th of September today, so 9 days from now, and it will be the 2 year mark from when I walked into the FBI office there in Quantico, Virginia, and was basically summarily executed from my role as an FBI agent. And yeah, it just it continues marching on. But Joe, he told me so he came out, I don't know, 2 weeks ago maybe, to try to finish up some of the last bits of this story. He's been working on it for a few weeks at least now, and we've been messaging back and forth. But he lives in the once great state of Wisconsin as well, so he a couple hour drive over to where I am, and put the finishing touches on it. But he told me that my story, since he first heard it, has always resonated with him. And then after we testified, even more so. And he's like, it just is such an example of how wicked and off the rails our government has gone. And he's like, I will do my best to not let it die. And we were messaging a little bit over the weekend. And on Sunday, I think it was, he told me that it's breaking records over at the Blaze, which I was astounded by. And unless you're new to the show, you probably won't be surprised to hear me say this, but for some reason, God has deemed fit or necessary to kind of put us back into a smaller spotlight again. Not in front of Congress. Probably that probably won't happen again for you or I, but people are paying attention again for some reason. And like you've got some travel coming up. I just got back from North Dakota. I'm headed, both of us are headed to Las Vegas in a couple weeks. So some things are moving behind the scenes again for some reason. I can't really put my finger on it, but I'm grateful for it. And I certainly am grateful to the Blaze for running a long piece like this, because even when I read it the other day on Saturday, when it came out, I got teary, man. And Heidi read it and she's like, geez, like it's our story. We contributed heavily to it. And still reading it, it's like, oh yeah, I kind of forget how overwhelming some of this stuff has been and how horrible it has been. But it's a hill to die on, right? And you've heard me say many times, how could I look my daughters in the eye and tell them to do the right thing, even when it's hard, if I'm not willing to do it?
And I mean, even reading through it myself, and for the audience's benefit, let's just highlight a couple things. Garrett made 19 disclosures to Congress. All right. He got to the healthy baker's dozen and was like, nope, I got another half dozen for you. And I guess the genesis for the scales falling away from your eyes was really the way that the FBI behaved about coronavirus and how that they were violating employees' rights and being unconstitutional in that regard. And then I think you looked around and said, well, wait, things that maybe I just brushed off before, I'm going to be a little bit more cynical about at this point. So a couple of the highlights that I identified, and I think the big one that they went after you falsely about was Project Veritas and the Ashley Biden diary story that they were able to acquire and that they were being investigated because Joe Biden sent his henchmen over to go after those people for that, even though they didn't run it, but they wound up arresting and convicting and sentencing the 2 people that found Ashley Biden's diary that said that Joe Biden was showering with her and doing unspeakable things to her. And the DOJ said that they didn't have to go by the same protocols because Project Veritas wasn't a journalist organization. But wouldn't you know it, it was a sensitive investigative matter, which means something if you're an FBI agent. Care to elaborate on that one?
Yeah. So that, you know, this is a big one, really, because it really goes to what Steve and I talk about a lot on this show is your constitutional rights. And in this case, I looked at it. There was publicly available information of James O'Keefe's door getting kicked in and some of their other journalists. And I remember thinking, like, what is going on here? Like, how and why is the DOJ and the FBI doing this and deeming it necessary and deeming it appropriate? And just from my time in law enforcement, I was like, this seems incorrect to me. I was already aware of the Pentagon Papers case, New York Times versus US from the 70s. The Supreme Court ruled that it's a prior restraint case. So they basically ruled that a news entity can not divulge who their sources are for information. And in that case, it was classified information. And the Supreme Court said, nope, sorry, government, they can publish this information. Well, fast forward to 2021 in this Ashley Biden diary and everything. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, this is journalism. This is First Amendment protected activity. And now you're doing search warrants on these people's homes, on their devices, and you're trying to charge them. And let's remember this piece about the Veritas case. They never ran a story about the Ashley Biden diary because they couldn't verify and corroborate with enough certainty. That right there should tell you, and say what you want about some of their methods. And don't get me wrong, like, I don't care for James O'Keefe. I don't think that he is a good person. I don't think that he's a decent human being. I certainly don't think that he's a humble, God-fearing man. But that doesn't mean the FBI gets to come and kick your door in when you're engaged in First Amendment protected activity on behalf of yourself as a journalist and on behalf of your organization. And so what the FBI did, they labeled them a SIM, a sensitive investigative matter, like you said, and then it was for news media. But then in court filings, the DOJ is saying, nope, they're not a journalistic entity. And it's like, you can't have this both ways. So now, not only do I look at it as a First Amendment violation, I look at it as a Fourth Amendment violation, because you're searching their articles because they seized all that stuff and went into their homes, and you're searching this stuff in violation of their due process. That's illegal to do. And then fast forward to when Jennifer Lee Moore was deposed in April and then again in June of 2023. She claims that it ruined the case. Well, why would a case, if a case was righteous and information about the case came out, and then the FBI and the DOJ closed the case? Well, if you had a righteous case, there would be no reason to close it.
Facts don't change.
Right.
And what people don't know, need to understand about a sensitive investigative matters, it's just an extra layer of scrutiny, actually quite a bit of scrutiny that goes into that. It has to be approved up the chain of command more than just like a frontline supervisor says, okay, Garrett, no typos, you're good to go on this one. It goes all the way up to the executives within your field office and then executives back at FBI headquarters. And then they actually have to take it over to the Department of Justice, to their people. So this investigation, they can't say, well, we didn't know about it. There were a lot of mucky mucks and executives aware of this investigation and therefore comfortable with going forward with it, and therefore comfortable with lying publicly about the fact that, oh, they're not a journalist organization. So that's an admission of guilt, not just of one rogue person. It's lots of people within a position of leadership. There's some other ones. You came out with the threat tags, with labeling parents at school board meetings, EDU official threat tag. It's just sort of a way that information is organized, but that very creation of that means that the FBI was intending to start opening up investigation of parents under a domestic terrorism label. And similarly, the Betsy Ross flag and the Gadsden Don't Tread on Me flag being the symbols of domestic terrorism when they're just historical American references that are part of our heritage. Then you've told us before, but just go back into just to remind and tell the new people about the January 6th person that you were obligated to go and investigate unconstitutionally, I would argue.
Right. Again, and yeah, we've talked about it before, but yeah, this became a big one because this was in January of 2021. So it was right after January 6th. It was I want to say around January 20th or so. I get this lead from headquarters, and it's based off of an anonymous tip. And as you recall, Steve, during that time, everybody was getting these leads, and it was becoming quite apparent just within a few weeks of January 6th that this was different. And um, again, because of I guess kind of how I was built as an investigator, Supreme Court case law comes to mind again. This case, Navarrete versus California, 2014, basically the Supreme Court ruled that with an anonymous tip, a law enforcement officer can take no legal action towards an arrest or something along those lines without corroborating some of the claims of that anonymous tip on their own. Because this anonymous tip I got said, I know that John Doe was at January 6th, and I know that John Doe had a firearm, and so did the people with John Doe. And this is where John Doe lives. And it's like, okay, well, how do you know those things? Now you don't leave a callback number or an email or even your name for me to ask you some follow-up questions on this information that you're alleging. I mean, this is a big deal to allege a crime like that. And I start looking into it. It turned out that the John Doe lived in a city that I had prior contact in before with the police department. As you know, being a former cop, whenever I headed to wherever in Kansas, because this place was a couple hour drive for me, I don't know that city. I don't know anything about it. I don't know my way around. So in my previous interaction, the first place I went was the police department, and started to build some rapport there with some of the officers, and they really helped solve that issue at that time. And so I call them up. I call the police department up, and I tell them a little bit of the background. And they're like, hey, we actually know this guy pretty well. I'm gonna and the guy I talked to was a sergeant. He's like, I'm gonna head over there myself and talk to him. And I don't know, a half hour later, maybe, the sergeant called me back and he said, hey, he doesn't want to talk without a lawyer. And so I'm like, okay, I mean, he doesn't have to talk to me. Eventually, a few days later, I do end up calling the guy and talking to him. And he told me, he's like, look, I'm not going to tell you anything about where I was on January 6th or where I wasn't. And regardless of where I was, whether it was in a different state or not, I didn't break any laws. And I was like, okay, well, the guy's not going to talk. That certainly is his right. But I'm trying to run this down thoroughly in the meantime. And while I'm doing that, because I'm like, you know what, I got to dot every I and cross every T on this. And in the end, it ended up being one of my longest 302s, which, for those who don't know, an FD 302 is basically the form that FBI agents use to write their report. And I write up this long report, my detailing the minutia of everything I did to get to the conclusion that I got to. Well, during the meantime, I get another lead from FBI headquarters from the same FBI agent who sent me the initial lead about this John Doe. And I know his real name. I'm not going to share it, but they say in this lead, hey, we want you to send a federal grand jury subpoena to AR15.com because we think that this screen name, and they gave me a screen name, we think that this user is the same as your John Doe. And I'm like, where are you getting this idea from? Like, there's nothing to indicate that that's the case. And so I look into this lead for this federal grand jury subpoena. And this federal grand jury subpoena had been shopped around multiple different offices, and nobody served it because, thankfully, the two other times it had been sent out, those agents were also like, I don't have enough information to serve a subpoena on AR15.com for this user. And so now it comes to me, and I'm like, they're just trying to get this information and trying to get somebody to do it for them because they know it's wrong. Well, while I'm working on that, I get a facial recognition match. One of the first things I did, I pulled the guy's driver's license photo, and the image that comes through from the lab in Quantico, I was like, there's something wrong here. The guy that they said was a facial recognition match for my guy didn't look anything like him. He had a full head of hair, 150 pounds lighter. And I'm like, what is going on here? Like, this case is a soup sandwich. And they're trying to, I don't know why they're doing this. I don't know what the deal is. Now, fast forward to present and look at everything January 6th related. Well, we know why. They're just trying to destroy people because they're their political enemy. And as we've long said, there are people from January 6th who deserve to have been arrested and charged for things. The worst actors certainly should have been. Not everybody, though, and definitely in this case, not my guy. And so eventually I run down this facial recognition thing, and it was somebody in Kansas City used a 25-year-old driver's license photo. And I'm like, okay, here again is another due process issue. That's kind of the long and short of it, I guess.
I mean, and this is, we just covered like 3 or 4 things you brought forward. I mean, and Garrett did 19 of them over a course of many months, and winds up doing a transcribed interview like me, publicly testifying like me, and not hearing anything after that from the people who are allegedly supposed to be fighting on the Hill for us, or people that have the institutional power to give us maybe a sortie mission, some air cover, but they're not willing to do that. But nevertheless, Garrett still will continue to say he would have done that all along. Do the right thing, the right time, the right way, for the right reasons. So I encourage everyone to go and check this piece out. It's at The Blaze. It again by Joe Hanneman, Steve Baker, profiling what Garrett's trials and tribulations were, how his family has suffered as a result of that. Now going on 2 years, unpaid, indefinitely suspended forever. And then we can transition though to some other examples outside of our little cohort, but these people are suspendables nonetheless. They would fit the bill. So to a mutual friend of ours, that's Wendy Staunch Mahomey for Uncover DC. And Uncover DC is covering this other woman. Her name is Bevelyn Williams. Now, she just got sentenced to 41 months in prison for a drive-by shooting. Oh, no, actually for trying to save babies from being murdered. It's a long piece, and Wendy does a great job of laying out, but this is pretty shady stuff. And this is all derivative and downstream of how the Department of Justice and the FBI are all in following the Jackson Dobbs decision that put abortion back to the states, that they're going to use all the levers of power to go after people who are pro-life, and see if we can't find a plumb line here of weaponization and trying to be creative and novel about how we're going to go after our political enemies. So Bevelyn protested at a Manhattan abortion clinic in 2020 during the coronavirus pandemic, when many businesses were shut down because of the mandates.
But you got to remember, Steve, that murdering babies is a necessary.
It's an essential. Yes. It's essential up there with lotto tickets and strip clubs. So New York Attorney General Letitia James, who we've talked about before, she is all about murdering the babies. She sued Bevelyn in 2021. The case was settled in court with an order that would ensure that Williams was never within 30 feet of the clinic. Now, Williams protested at this clinic in Manhattan. At one point, she and her friend were arrested and jailed without any legal basis for doing so. And according to her, the ticket was canceled via email. They were arrested because they used coronavirus lockdowns as the excuse to basically get rid of them at the point. Now, the Department of Justice launched its investigation after the Dobbs ruling, 2 years after the protest took place. So the protest in 2020, Letitia James gets her pound of flesh in 2021, and the Department of Justice gets really upset when the Supreme Court rules that Roe v. Wade is gone, and now they're going to start going after people that they want to. So they opened this investigation in 2022.
I mean, think of that right there, Steve. 2 years, you're telling me the feds are going to wait for 2 years to go after somebody.
A FACE Act violation.
Yeah. Give me a break, dude.
And this is what the law is. face free access to clinical entrances. That's what it stands for. It was passed with bipartisan support in the 90s. And if the Republicans had not done that, it would not have passed. They had the numbers to knock it down in both the House and the Senate. We only needed one of those houses to step up because they were under the misperception, because it's totally not one party that we ain't in, that it'll be applied equally. And the FACE
Sure.
Act has provisions in it that are supposed to be applied equally. And they do the thing that, they always do to make us swallow bad legislation is we're going to add a religious exemption, right? Or
Mhm.
their version of it was, well, you can't stop people from, you can't prevent people from going to murder their babies, but they can't prevent you from going to church, which is interesting because she got arrested in New York City where they were stopping people from going to church. So FACE Act violation. And then also you can't trespass or damage crisis pregnancy centers or prevent a woman from going in there. But the current attorney general, while he's not when he's not talking about how the Department of Justice is not weaponized and they are just the good men and women doing the rule of law, has said that they won't investigate people firebombing crisis pregnancy centers because it happens at nighttime. And that's beyond apparently their ability to investigate. So they launched this late because the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice wants to go after pro-lifers. They wind up charging her and she goes to court. And there's four crimes that she's charged with. Now, one of the allegations was that Bevelin crushed the hand of a woman that was there. Meanwhile, she's like an activist who didn't even go to the hospital or go to a doctor afterwards. And she went afterwards when the DOJ sought her out. So they created a witness, created a victim.
Because
jury-
like right here. So wouldn't Letitia James and New York, wouldn't they have been like, oh, she crushed someone's hand? Like, wouldn't they have figured that out in the 2 years before the DOJ said, hey, we're going to charge this woman? Like, it's just riddled. It's just riddled with ridiculous tyranny.
So we have tyrants, right? And then we have more people who have the opportunity to be like Bevelin. Now, I don't have to agree with you, just like you said, like you don't like James O'Keefe, but you would stand for his First Amendment protection. You have 12 people in a jury that have the opportunity to say, no. I don't care what your position is on baby murder. That didn't happen. And they tried, and then they realized that the heat in the kitchen was a little too much. So the jury found her not guilty on the charge of causing the injury to the woman's hand.
How about that?
And then the judge sent a note to the jury and told them that they had to find her guilty on all four charges in order to be found guilty. So they relented and found her guilty. And now she's been sentenced to 41 months in prison.
Dude, that is so freaking ridiculous, man. That is so absurd, because that is when the jury should say, okay, fine. Then she walks free. Like, oh man. And for a judge to meddle like that, and look, I get it. Like, a judge does have to give a jury instructions and things of that nature, but not like this. You don't have to. I've never heard of anything like this, Steve. Have you? Where a judge goes back to the jury and says, you must find her guilty on this charge. If she's going to be guilty on any of them, you have to find her guilty on all. That's not how criminal law works. That's not how it's supposed to work. And dude, just the fact, I know I'm stuck on it a little bit, but 2 years after the state already figured out their quote unquote punishment for this, ridiculous law violation, that now the feds are going to get involved and come bearing their hammer down on this woman. It's beyond the pale, man. And a jury, there's 12 of you there. Not one of you could stand up and say, no, this is wrong. I'm not going to do it. And assert your will that way. Like, oh dude, it's a crippling reminder of the cowardice of people. Like,
the fact that there wasn't a jury nullification.
Yeah.
On that alone. And I don't know if you noticed, but Bevelin's a little tan.
Mm-hmm.
This is not, we got to go after those vile, vicious MAGA supporting Republicans because they're white supremacists. Bevelin is what do they call it? A woman of color. She's a black woman who is a white martyr. She's going to prison. She's got kids of her own.
Yeah.
And she's stepping up to protect babies who she will never meet and will not know, because she recognized that she had an Isaiah 6:8 moment
Yeah.
and said, "Here I am." And that is not a like politician running for public office. Like, here I am. I really didn't want to run, but I have to do it for the people. Bull crap. We all know you wanted to run. That's why you formed an exploratory committee 9 months ago. Okay. And you've been fundraising for the year and a half. This was a person saying, like, I'm here. I have other stuff going on, including raising my own children, but I will if you want to send me.
Yeah.
She did.
Like, honestly, if you're going to only pick one, that's the hill right there. Baby murder. I mean, that's it. And look, now it's 2024. She's going away for 3.5 years. She's been dealing with this for 4 years. What other example do you need that your government is rogue, that your government hates life, that your government hates true justice? I feel like I've been bringing up Romans 13 a lot lately. Romans 13:4 says that government, the governing authorities, are supposed to be a servant for your good. That word servant in the Greek is diakonos. It's where we get the word for deacon. Deacons are supposed to be servants in the church. Government is supposed to be your servant for good. It goes on to say to punish the wrongdoer. And it says, if you do good, then you don't have anything to fear. But if you do evil, then you do have to fear, because the governing authority does not bear the sword in vain. What other example do you need about the government bearing the sword in vain than this? That's precisely what they're doing. And they're punishing good and rewarding wrong. It's completely flipped on its head. Our country has flipped God's divine mandate for the governing authorities on its head.
This is the social compact being broken. We talked about it last week, and it's just completely shattered. It is. We give up some of our rights to government, our God-given rights, so that we can form a nation. Because honestly, if we don't, the nature of man is other people are, and they're going to come take our stuff. But we unite around that, and we say, you have certain duties and responsibilities. This is not a blank check. We have expectations. And it's the art of the deal, and they are not fulfilling that deal. They're actually turning it on its head.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the FACE Act. I'm going to pull this up. Shameless plug, my Substack, lastline.substack.com. But this is old. I wrote this a long time ago. Steve, you mentioned our depositions, and a few weeks. So I was deposed in February of 23. A few weeks later, in March, my name got leaked. Parts of my testimony got leaked, and I just love this part. So from one of the articles that the Dems colluded with, it says, when pressed by Democrats, O'Boyle said he did not know that the FBI had arrested 2 individuals. So think of that, had arrested 2 individuals associated with attacks on pregnancy centers set up by abortion rights opponents. So that would be those who are pro-life and anti-baby murder. But he was aware that it had offered a $25,000 reward for information regarding these pregnancy centers being vandalized, the transcript read. And then I said, correct, I did not know that 2 individuals had been arrested. Two. When there have been at least 230 attacks on churches and pro-life groups in recent months. And that was in 2022. So here's where I got that number from, lifenews.com. Radical extremists attacked 230 churches and pro-life groups in wave of pro-abortion violence in 2022. This article is from the end of December of 2022. So what do you think that number's up to now? But they're going to go after Bevelin.
Bevelin had resolved her issue 2 years before that.
Dude, it just is. I mean, man, like this is the topic that will put the gob meter through the roof. Like it's going to break the mercury in this.
Oh, well, take a breath, Garrett, because we have other people that we need to highlight, some other hills to die on. But before we do that, let's take a sponsor of the day, and let's go to the Pepper Beef Company, all natural beef. Guys, go to amradbeef.com. That's amradbeef.com. And when you do, and you will get a 15% off on all their beef products there. You can get just like a single bag. You can get a subscription service. And if you do, you actually get an additional discount. And then we have an additional promo code morning20 that gets you 20% off. These are all natural steaks from Texas, American made, no mRNA jabs, nothing lab grown. If you just need a little bit or a lot of it, all that's there. I encourage you to get different counts, different sorts of cuts too. I mean, they have like strips and fillets and all that freeze dried, and just throw it in some broth. And in about 8 minutes, it is ready to go, rehydrated, and it has a shelf life of about 20 years. So encourage you all to take advantage of that. All right, Garrett, let's transition on purpose to this story from the Daily Signal. Elizabeth Troutman Mitchell, another friendly. She works over for Daily Signal. California took away a widow's teenage daughter to transition her because they have legislation very much like Tim Awal's state, the land of 1,000 genders. They ripped that off of California. So this mother, and then she's unnamed because she is still at risk. And she's actually, this is in her rearview mirror. We will get to that. And it's not really worth probably identifying herself for that. I'm not going to give her a hard time about that. So the mother in California lost her daughter to the foster care system in 2016. She wouldn't support her then 14-year-old girl identifying as a boy. So this is not new legislation. This is not a new policy. This went on 8 years ago in California. Mother of two. She's a widow. Her husband died years before this happened. She was accused of emotional abuse because she forbade her teenage daughter from binding her chest, which causes permanent structural damage to a person's body. So not allowing her daughter to physically harm herself made California uber mad. Her daughter was taken from the family and placed in foster home for a few months. The mother had to hire lawyers to regain custody of her daughter and clear her name because the mother was a Christian counselor. She would not be able to continue on in that career with having reports to Child Protective Services, right? So it's self-preservation, but more importantly, preservation of her daughter's life.
Mm-hmm.
After a few months in a packed foster home, wouldn't you know it, this girl was like, this sucks, and said she wanted to come home. So she admitted to lying about the abuse, saying she got the idea to accuse her mother of abuse from people online who said that was the ticket to getting away from her own family. She returned home, but because she was a teenage daughter and she had a mother, they started to fight because that's what teenagers and their mothers do. And I hear them in the background over there. Good luck in the next few years, Garrett.
I know, right?
So she called social workers again on her mother a few more times and accused her mom of abuse for refusing to buy her male clothing. The mother received a California Child Abuse Central Index violation for declining to take her daughter to a program at the Los Angeles LGBT Center for LGBTQ plus youths age 2 to 25.
Wow, age 2.
So a couple of years now go by, age 17. The daughter took testosterone without her mother's knowledge, given to her by a therapist.
Oh, gosh.
But then after a couple of doses said she felt that God was telling her to stop.
Well,
so she stopped.
Yeah, that's good at least. I mean, again, I won't go through the whole Romans 13 again, but here's another example. Your children, and look, I'll caveat it with this. There certainly are times where it's appropriate for the government to intervene in a family where the leaders of the family, the mother and the father, or one of them is doing wrong, is harming a child, their own child. So this isn't a blanket statement to this, but our children are not wards of the state. I know we've talked about it before. Joe Biden, maybe a year and a half, maybe, talked about how children are all of our children. No.
Hillary Clinton wrote a book called It Takes a Village.
Yeah. This is another satanic lie. While you're going through the story, because it's a single mother, she's already got an uphill battle here.
She's more likely to need help from the state.
Right. And she's like, no, I need to stick by my values. I'm not going to let my daughter do this. This is wrong. I know it's wrong. And the government now is going to intervene on behalf of the wrong again. But this verse, Proverbs 29:15, the rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child left to himself brings shame to his mother. That's this in a nutshell. The mother is saying, no, don't bind your chest. You're not a man. Like I can sort of picture this with my daughters, like, which, as an aside, I think if my math is right, when Gwen is 19, Lucy will be 13, and then Iris and Paige will be somewhere in the middle. It's gonna be mayhem over here, Steve. Lots of teenagers running around.
4 teenage girls. But you do get the benefit of cleaning your guns 4 different occasions for the
Yes.
prom dates, which should be fun. Maybe I'll have to road trip to Wisconsin if we haven't moved you to Florida at that point.
Yes. Hopefully, I'll be in Florida. We'll be doing AMRAD in person live. But yeah, this is crazy, and that she's had to fight this battle for, again, years now, years. And look, we've talked about this plenty of times too. California, way ahead of the bell curve on this, per usual. But as California goes, so do the rest of us. I mean, we've got to turn away from this evil.
And just to me, also the element of harm in this case, even if you're a loony and saying like, I'm going to affirm your gender, really, you are a boy,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to sign on for you crushing your torso, as opposed to doing. I mean, even take the Christian counselor out of it. She's a counselor. I'm sure she believes in the ability to counsel people who might have something going on emotionally, psychologically between their ears to get them help.
Right.
She would be an authority on that. If we're going to appeal to authority, someone who has that background, I think, is probably worth having the conversation with. And the state says, we can't trust your judgment. Actually, we're going to put a charge on you, a violation on you, so that you can't be a position of authority,
Mm-hmm.
even for your own child, but other children as well.
Right.
Which is shows the malevolence of the state and the strength that this woman had to say, look, here and no more. It stops here. I'm going to fight for it. And she did, and she triumphed. Thankfully, in this case, it's actually a good ending, most optimal that we probably would get out of California.
Right.
Unlike Bevelyn, whose story is still ongoing, but she'll receive her just desserts in this life or the next, unquestionably.
Mm-hmm.
And staying on this topic of protecting your kids and more craziness from a state. And actually, we went from DOJ, so it's federal, state, which is California. Now we're going to go to like a local jurisdiction in Colorado. And this is from the ADF, the Alliance Defending Freedom. They have filed a lawsuit on behalf of these parents. Now, what's going on in this local municipality, this local county? It's Jefferson County Public Schools. So the parents, there's a couple of different families. The first one, Joe and Serena Wales. They allowed their 11-year-old daughter to go on a field trip to Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. They were told the daughter would be rooming with 3 other 5th grade girls. 5th grade girls. It wasn't until their daughter was in her room getting ready for bed on the first night of the trip that she discovered she was to share a bed with a boy who identified as a girl.
Oh my gosh.
Second family, Brett and Suzanne Roller sent their 11-year-old son on a 6th grade camping trip. His 18-year-old counselor was not male, but was instead a non-binary female. The counselor was not just sleeping and changing in the same cabin, but was tasked with supervising the boys as they showered.
Dude.
Jefferson County Public Schools policy directs the students should be assigned to share overnight accommodations with other students that share the student's gender identity rather than rooming by sex. The school district refused to provide any accommodations, be they for just feeling uncomfortable or their religious beliefs. And they said that they would not agree to notify parents in advance of this policy. I said, in the article says 3 parents. So I said 2 and gave the details. They name another couple and they don't have an experience. They just said, we have kids in the school district and they could be subject to it. We're putting our name on it.
Good for them. I mean, it's absolutely insane that this is where we're at. Colorado, like middle of America, like And I know Colorado is pretty left these days by and large, but this is insane, dude. Absolutely insane that they would even have to fight this battle. And again, it's an example of the government rewarding the wrong. Like, and basically, for you Shakespeare fans out there, biting their thumb at the parents and saying, nope, like, too bad, screw you. We're going to do what we want and you're going to comply with us. Like, that's not how government is supposed to work. Not in the alleged land of the free.
And this is sort of like the First Amendment problems that we've seen in Wisconsin and Ohio, that the teachers that said, I'm not using the pronouns, right? And like in those situations, this is going to court. The school districts are saying, oh no, we're not going to take a moment to self-evaluate and realize, wow, that's really crazy. They're all in for that. And you will bend the knee. You will assimilate to this. Resistance is futile. They're the Borg from Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the mind virus that we are up against now. And look, Elon Musk, we profiled a few episodes back where he lost a child to this. Essentially, that child's still alive, but he's basically disowned Elon Musk, and Elon Musk bent the knee originally. I mean, I don't think he did so because he was a believer in it. He just trusted the science because he
Right.
seems to be like a science given guy. And he said, all right, trust the experts, and this is going to save my child. And now he's lost a child over it. So he's now vowed and pledged a lot of money to go and push back on it. But he's kind of has the FU money. These three couples don't. I mean, I don't imagine that Bevelin in New York City is rocking with any sort of Jeff Bezos money. I probably would have heard of Bevelin before now.
Right.
Same goes for the anonymous mother in California. We would know her name if she was a prominent person. But these are all people that evaluated the facts and circumstances on the ground and said, nope, this is the hill. I'm here. Do I need to be here? Yeah, I'm not going to be afraid of that. Damn the torpedoes, damn the consequences, because this is a fight that's worth having. And it's fight over saving babies' lives, and protecting your children's innocence, and just protecting your children in generally from just being co-opted by this spirit of the age, the rainbow kamikaze that is a death cult.
Yeah.
That you can't say anything else other than that. If they can't kill the baby in the womb or when it has a cuticle on its pinky toe still in the birth canal, and they can behead it because they live in New York, where Letitia James says that's A-okay, well, then we will just try to indoctrinate them to castrate themselves, or engage in activities that lead them statistically to be more suicidal. This is a death cult. And I don't know why more people aren't recognizing the facts and circumstances are the actual existential risk to our culture.
Yeah, I mean, you nail it here. It's a death cult. That's what this is. Like Elon said, I've lost a son to the woke mind virus. Absolutely right. And what does it boil down to? It comes down to the truth. And just because I want to, I can't say that I'm a female. I'm not. I'm a man. God made me a man. It's very simple. Just like I can't say 2 + 2 is 7. It's simply not true. It just is not true. No matter how much you want 2 + 2 to identify as 7, it can't. It never will. It is impossible for that to ever be the truth. And what has happened is, and I think Elon's a good example. He thought he knew the truth, and he thought, well, my son says he's a girl, and I love my son, and so I'm going to promote what my son wants. Well, your son is wrong, and you were wrong because you thought the experts had your best interest in mind. They don't. For people who have seen Matt Walsh's documentary about what is a woman, it's very clear in there that the quote unquote medical industry, because it's not medicine, but it's a cash cow. This trans death cult is a cash cow. And again, speaking of truth, just the other day, I think on Sunday again, over the weekend, maybe it was Monday, I don't know, I saw a video on Twitter of a trans man. So I think it was a man who had like breast implants.
The Heritage guy.
Yes, dancing in front of the
I recognize that building. You and I were hanging out in there.
Yep. I was like, what the? And dressed like Satan, and has a cross and is gyrating, and I just was like, wow, that it's just anti-truth. Like, but then on one hand, you're promoting Satan, and I mean, believe these people when they tell you who they are. Like, you're dressed like Satan. You have a cross in your hand to basically chastise Christianity because of what? Because of simple truths like God created them men and woman, men and woman. He created them. That's in Genesis. Like, it's in the very beginning. Some of these simple truths, and we live in a society now that says no, just accept your truth, Steve. Just whatever you think is true. Well, that's why we're on this very slippery slope, is because that's not how truth works.
And, you talk about that men and women are different. So we're going to go back to the baby murder thing, and then just for our last story of the day before the palate cleanse. But it's the same story. It's a face act, but the way that the guy takes a tact versus Bevelin is just like, oh, that's a dude, and she's a woman. So probably not the smartest way to go about doing it, but the timing of it's a similar sort of story. And then the weaponization and the lengths that our government's willing to use to go after people at the federal and the state level is pretty abhorrent. So this comes from the Christian Post. Feds sue pro-life activist who barricaded himself in an abortion clinic bathroom. So the DOJ filed a civil lawsuit against Matthew Connolly for a FACE Act, which he did at a abortion clinic in Philadelphia in August 2021. Check a calendar lately.
Mm-hmm.
Officials say Connolly refused to leave the restroom despite multiple pleas from the clinic staff and a security officer, prompting the abortion center to evacuate all the patients and staff. After the Philadelphia Police Department arrived at the facility and unsuccessfully attempted to get Connolly to leave the restroom, they shut down the streets, surrounded the clinic, and brought in a SWAT team.
Oh, gosh.
The SWAT team broke down the door and removed Connolly from the facility by carrying him out on a stretcher. And this is the hack that the DOJ uses. That's a trespass.
That's what I. Yep,
okay,
what
that's
I
a
was just
trespass. It's a criminal trespass. It's a local matter.
Yep.
But the DOJ says, well, they shut down the clinic.
So
So
it's a
that
fake act.
obstructed women from murdering their babies. So we're going to go after him 3+ years later.
You know, right off the bat, this story is problematic for me. What is the government doing in a civil suit against a private citizen? Okay, like if the clinic,
I wouldn't have a problem with civil suits in lieu of trying to put Bevelin in prison,
yeah,
but they're not doing that. They're just trying to get anything they can at this point.
anything they can, and it's like, you know what? If the clinic wants to sue the guy civilly, go ahead, fine. That's kind of how our system works. But the government, you're going to bring the full weight of the government down on
Unlimited
this guy?
resources. The
Unlimited.
clinic, I mean, it's Planned Parenthood or whatever, so I'm sure they'd have lots of funding.
Yeah.
But at least theoretically, there's a limit on how much you could pay an attorney to go and do your bidding on a losing proposition.
Yeah, but then I think the finer point is what you said, is this is just a trespass. So, okay, even though you had to shut down the clinic, fine, trespass the guy, arrest him, write him tickets, maybe even for like disorderly conduct and trespass. Like, in this scenario, like, fine, that's what you get. Like, what are you doing, dude? Why are you barricading yourself in their bathroom? They're asking you to leave. You don't. I'm for your cause. I'm not really for your methods. You know, like
It's like the guy wearing the Grim Reaper suit outside. That's not a way to change hearts and minds.
Right. And like, I worked FACE Act in Wichita. There was an abortion clinic. I was a DT guy. My first case was abortion related, and this lady who ran the clinic, she would contact us all the time, and I never once. I would take the information and I'd look into it. I'd run the name, because often it was people she knew who they were. And I'd look at it, I'd be like, no, this is not a FACE Act violation. You know, you got your security guard out there getting in their face. Like, if anything, call Wichita PD. And like, I would send her the statutes and I'd say, this is not, that maybe here's even a Wichita Muni code or Kansas state law that might be more applicable. And it's like, not everything's a FACE Act violation. Like, but it just is another ridiculous example, dude, of how absurd. Like, again, though, go ahead. That's the hill. That certainly is the hill to die on. But your methodology could probably be better. And the government is still ridiculous and tyrannical for what they're doing now.
He recognized the hill. He just maybe needed to not call it an airstrike in that fashion. Maybe just a simple presence on the hill would have been fair enough. Do have a palate cleanse because we are now moving into the fall. Football season is here, and I don't partake in it because in the 1 second that my kids wanted to watch, I saw End Racism, and it takes all of us behind the end zones. But Garrett, you got a final thought for us?
I do. In regards to our theme for today, Hills to Die On, I thought this was fitting. You can see if you're watching, I've got a lot of it highlighted. I won't read the whole thing, but my small group Bible study, we're going through the book of Colossians right now, and I thought this is quite fitting from chapter 3. I'll just start in verse 1. It says, "If then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you: sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. On account of these, the wrath of God is coming. In these you too once walked when you were living in them, but now you must put them all away: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices, and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its creator." And I just think that is especially fitting. Pick up your cross and follow him. It's really the only way. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I encourage you guys all, go read Colossians. It's short. At least finish off chapter 3, which I started today. But Christ died for us, and we are a new creature in him, and we have to put off the old self and die to him too.
So what is the authentic self of a former professional football player, legend, Hall of Fame quarterback, Peyton Manning? I miss those commercials. I do miss those. But this was a funny take of what an actual United Way commercial featuring Peyton Manning actually should look like.
Oh, that's good.
Completely unrelated, but it came across my feed, and I just miss Peyton Manning's commercials because the guy has a good sense of humor.
He does.
And football's back, Steve.
Well, Pop Warner football in my household, and my son's team's 3-1. So
nice.
We got the victory this weekend, and we're gonna watch game tape because he's all in for that.
Nice.
So that's the hill that we're going to die on today.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we appreciate your time today. Thanks for watching the American Radicals podcast on Rumble, rumble.com/amradpod. Reminder to smash the thumbs up and follow the channel. And we'll be back with you Thursday, 08:30. Until then, have a great afternoon.
You've been listening to the voice of the Suspendables on the American Radicals podcast. Follow us on rumble.com/amradpod.
Everybody